lag.
Okay, I'll watch out for the little red box.
There you go.
Right then. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Environment and Climate Action Scrutiny panel on March the 10th. And tonight we're going to be talking about the lower traffic neighbourhoods. Before we start, just welcome. And do we have any apologies so far?
No apologies for absence, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, in that case, as members of the public are watching, can I please introduce all the committee members in alphabetical order? Hopefully they're here. If not, we'll come back to them later on. Right. Is Mamota Akansoglu here? Okay, I don't think he's here yet. Can we go on to Maria Alexandru?
Good evening, I'm here, Councillor Maria Alexandru for Winchmore Hill Ward and Climate Change Shadow. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria. And next we have Daniel Anderson.
Yeah, I'm here, Chair. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, Daniel. And next on our list we have Tolga Aramas. Tolga's not here yet. Okay. And next online we have Elif Herbal. Okay, none from Elif yet. And next we have Charif Gurwardena.
Hi everyone. I'm Charif Gurwardena, councillor from Southgate Ward.
Thank you, Charif. And next we have Lindsay Rawlings.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I'm here. I'm councillor in Town Ward.
And you've also got a title?
Yeah, I have got a title on Shadow Lead on Environment.
Thank you. And Councillor Has Yusuf. I represent Chase Ward, and I'm the chair of this panel. Thank you. Hopefully the other sort of panel members will log in when they can. I know we always have technical difficulties, right? Do we have, going on to item 2 of the agenda, do we have any declarations of interest? I will take silence as a no. Excellent. We'll go on to item number 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of February. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read them. Are they okay to pass, or has anyone got any questions? Okay, silence means that's quite good, so we can carry on. We're going to move on now to item 4. But before we begin, I want to read out a statement. All right. So before we begin proper, I want to say a few words, mainly for the benefit of the watching public. This meeting tonight was never on the schedule until recently. The subject was never on the cards when we discussed the works programme for the committee last year. But since then, LTNs have become a big issue. So this committee rightly arranged an extra date. And I would like to thank the governance team and all the other departments officers for making it happen. Now, I did try to get the meeting delayed until after April 30th, so that the legal figure of the LTN project could attend. However, due to PERDA rules governing items that deemed political, items not being allowed to sort of discuss during election periods, that wasn't possible. So as chair, I was given choice, either go ahead tonight or cancel the whole debate. Obviously, I chose to keep this date, and that was clearly the view of many of the committee. Now, I got a few emails from residents who thought tonight was all about taking a vote on LTNs. I did explain that LTNs were discussed earlier this year at full council, and by a democratic vote, it was decided to go ahead with the scheme. However, that doesn't mean that the door is shut on the debate. So that is why we can scrutinise schemes like this on this committee. Now, before that council meeting, all councillors received dozens and dozens of emails, pro and con, about the scheme. But after reading criticism that views were being ignored, I wrote to each resident who previously wrote in, telling them about tonight's meeting and that their concerns had been noted. However, I did not write back to any resident who was critical or insulting to any councillor or council officers. I draw the line there. Councillors and officers just do their duty to the best of their abilities. No one needs abuse. So tonight, and this is for the benefit of the public, tonight will not be about personalities. It will concentrate on the policy. Tonight's structure will be more or less as follows. After a short presentation, I will invite all panel members who wish to do so to initially ask 2 questions each. Then debate will open up for more questions. About 8:30, the debate with officers will conclude. The panel will then have a chat amongst themselves and we'll discuss a few things and make some recommendations. But obviously we will go away and think through our questions carefully, which we will again ask the department to sort of try and answer us. Our report will include all those replies and other findings. So with that, I think we can now begin the presentation, and I think it's going to be by Richard Easton, if I'm correct.
That's correct, Councillor, yes.
Yeah.
I think I can share my presentation.
Yeah, Richard, do you want to tell people who you are so that they know?
Sure, yes. My name is Richard Easton. I'm the Healthy Streets Programme Director, and that involves leading on a number of schemes based around increasing active travel and some town centre regeneration projects, but does include the LTN projects which fall under the quieter neighbourhood umbrella. Hopefully you can, if I go to show my slides.
Yeah, I can see them, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, if you're happy then, Councillor, I will press through. I know I've got 15 minutes, I think. I've got quite a few slides to get through, and so I'll move pretty rapidly, and we can always come back to a particular slide if that's wanted in the discussion. So what I'm going to cover is the background and reasons for LTNs, an overview of the current locations, touch on engagement, touch on initial findings, and then look forward. So just to go into the background then, I think we all know what a low traffic neighbourhood is, but I think it's important just to set the context before the discussion. So it's creating a neighbourhood where all roads are accessible by motor car and walking and cycling, but not necessarily by all routes. So some roads are filtered to prevent motor vehicles who are not just accessing the area, but are just looking to cut through to prevent them from doing that. Here we use what we call modal filters. People might have
Richard,
heard of.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt by saying your presentation's not moving.
Oh, it is on mine. Oh dear. I'm just going to share it in a slightly different way.
Richard, I think you might need to enable editing. Sometimes I have this problem.
I think if I. Right. I think if I share my desktop, that's going to be easier. Let me just. Is that moving?
Yeah, it is, thank you. And there's a big as well, so thank you, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Sorry about that. So yes, often people will talk about or hear about modal filters, and this is just an image to show what one looks like. So walking and cycling can continue, but no motor vehicles through there. They've been installed for many years, decades in some boroughs. These are not a new intervention, and indeed in Enfield we've had some of these around for many years. What we're doing now, of course, is implementing them in a slightly wider area, and I'll touch on that later. LTNs are certainly in response to current policy, both London mayoral policy and government policy, and it's those organisations that are funding the current work in Enfield. So we're taking forward these projects through external funding and not through council tax receipts. And there are lots of people doing these across London, particularly as part of the response to COVID-19, and I recognise that there are a range of views about whether that's right or wrong, but lots of boroughs are doing this. So 2 of those are in Enfield. They're a part of not just a response, I think, to COVID, but part of a long-term strategy as well. So the government has included these in their 10-point plan, and are actively encouraging these type of interventions to be brought forward. Now, of course, it's not just about the principle of low traffic neighbourhoods. Of the detail of how you do them and where you do them, of course, is important. But there is, it seems to be, a consensus in policy terms that these are a worthwhile intervention. And I just wanted to point out that we're not doing low traffic neighbourhoods are not a silver bullet, and in terms of bringing forward healthy streets across Enfield for the benefit of our community, there are one intervention that fits into a whole package of measures, and it's by coming forward with a comprehensive programme of different interventions that we think that will generate the change. So the Quieter Neighbourhood programme, of which low traffic neighbourhoods form part of, are one aspect of that overall approach. So some of the sort of benefits, the outcomes that we hope to see is overall, and some of these are sort of our longer term, but reducing accidents, improving health and well-being, typically through enabling more active travel, improving air quality, and improving the sense of feeling and community cohesion in these residential areas. So in terms of the current locations, here is an example of the type of filter that we've approached. So the ones that we're doing in Enfield are being done experimentally. That means that we can quite easily change and adjust them if necessary, and they're used using temporary materials that can be altered or indeed removed if that's the decision subsequently. So very quick and easy in relative terms to install. So we've got 3. The first is Fox Lane. I appreciate this slide is very busy and the detail is probably not particularly legible, but it's really just to show you define the area. Again, I think everybody is familiar with this area, but this is one of our key projects. And I'll come on to, when I talk about engagement and consultation, explain some of the differences between the way that the projects have been implemented. Connaught Gardens is another one that is sort of partly in the planning stages, although we have implemented some early works on Osborne and Windsor Road, and then Bowes as well, of course. And Bowes was a scheme that's been taken forward at much more pace, and I recognise some of the additional issues and challenges that generates, and we'll come on to discuss those, I'm sure. So let's just reflect on the engagement and consultation with residents, because that is clearly a key part of bringing forward any of the Healthy Streets schemes, and we do want to see resident involvement and engagement, and we genuinely believe that we can design and deliver better schemes as a result of that. We have developed and have this engagement hub, Let's Talk, which has a series of our projects on there, and each project that we're bringing forward has a dedicated project page, and that becomes the hub, the home, if you like, of information. So in terms of Fox Lane, I think it's worth just stepping through the process so that we can understand that there are some differences between how we've brought forward some of our current low traffic neighbourhoods. So Fox Lane has been discussed for many years, and I think a number of councillors here will will understand that in detail. And The current trial does follow an earlier trial. So we've had a previous trial a couple of years ago, which looked to address the issues that we were hearing from residents, predominantly about speed and traffic volume. And we looked to try to bring forward a scheme that would try and address that. And you know, the outcome of that was that the scheme wasn't effective in reducing speed and volume through a softer measures that still allowed people to pass through the area. We hoped that it would discourage them, and it didn't. So we did, as part of that trial, you know, say that we would bring forward further options if that didn't work. So we conducted some further engagement. And we came forward with a much more robust plan that went to public engagement. We had a public engagement, so this is towards the end of 2019, I think November, and there was a number of weeks where residents and business could comment. And throughout the time, I've personally have attended ward forums and resident association meetings, but there's been, you know, a whole series of discussions on a number of different levels. And as a result of that, we revised again the trial. So the feedback was that our initial proposals were too strong. We reviewed that, created more entry and exit points, and that's the trial that we've subsequently implemented, and now the consultation is ongoing. So a number of years of work leading up to where we are now. In terms of Connaught Gardens, again, you know, long-standing issues being raised by certain residents in the community. Again, I've attended ward forums and colleagues. There's all been a number of forums where this issue has been discussed. And so with this scheme, we've already implemented what we're calling phase 1, which is a fairly light intervention of one-way streets on 2 roads to address some immediate concerns that some residents had. And then we've shared what we think is an idea for a wider plan around the area. We shared that prior to Christmas, and residents, you know, had a number of weeks to feedback their comments. What we're doing now is reviewing those comments, seeing how that design needs to be amended, with the intention at some time in the future coming forward again with a further experimental scheme which will be accompanied by a consultation itself. So again, lots of opportunity, I think, for residents and businesses and other stakeholders to contribute towards the development of the design. Bowes, of course, is different. So and the context to Bowes is that we've used Department for Transport funding, and I've included here the snippet of the letter that we received about that. So essentially, DFT were very clear with us that we had a very limited amount of time in which to implement this in this scheme. And that dictated the pace that we worked at. And we chose Bowes for that funding because there's been such a long conversation again in this area of ward forums and you know, councillors coming to us saying that we wanted these problems addressed, that we thought that with this extra funding it was an opportunity to help address the issues in that area. We have done perception surveys before, but then the timeline that we had did mean that there was very limited pre-engagement, although we did do a number of things to communicate. And of course, there's a consultation that's ongoing now as part of the trial. So I'm sure we can come back to discuss some of those things. So just to give you an idea of where we're at. So Bowes was implemented by September and Fox Lane by October. Now, obviously, we're in remarkable times, and COVID is clearly impacting our ability to fully assess the impact of the schemes. We had a lockdown in December, and you know, and everybody knows where we are currently. So hopefully, you know, things are looking positive and optimistic that the restrictions start to ease. We'll start to see traffic normalise, and then we'll be able to continue to collect more data to help inform how we move forward. We've got external consultants reviewing all the community feedback, and they'll be coming forward with some reports. And we've got external consultants conducting air quality and noise assessments. We're working with Transport for London on bus impacts, and all of this will move forward to a public report. And in fact, later on next week, we have a webinar specifically for Bowes where we'll be able to go through some of this in a bit more detail, where the community will be invited and be able to participate. So I've touched on that there. In terms of the next steps for these current schemes, we're expecting an interim report in the summer. The experimental traffic order for Bowes is in place until January 22, and the webinar next week will give us an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. Fox Lane, we amended the scheme through responding to some residents' concerns about emergency vehicles access. So we made a change to that scheme, and we need to continue to assess that until May, and then we'll consider the next steps from there. Again, seeing how traffic starts to return over these next few weeks and months. And Connaught Gardens, I've already mentioned that we're monitoring phase 1 and assessing the feedback from phase 2 to see how that design needs to develop. In terms of looking forward, last few slides. We, of course, need to focus on the challenges. So these projects are not easy to deliver. They bring about, significant change, and we can see, from the interaction and the engagement that they are emotive issues and interventions. And we recognise that it's not easy, and we're working as hard as we can to address those challenges. Some key things, but there are others, are continuing to liaise with the emergency services, and we've got a very strong, I think, and collaborative relationship with the emergency services. We need to continue to review and understand and assess and consider the impact on surrounding roads. These schemes are designed with the intention of reassigning motor traffic away from smaller residential streets and onto those more key distributor roads who have a greater function of carrying traffic. Now, I understand and appreciate that people still live on those roads, and understanding the impacts and what other interventions we can bring forward on those roads is an important aspect of the scheme. We continue to develop how we communicate, and I hope that the webinar next week is an opportunity for us to do that. And equality needs to continue to be sort of the heart of our decision making. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about equality's impact assessment and where we're at with Bowes in the webinar, but again, we can, I'm sure, touch on that this evening as well. Looking forward, we will be looking for further discussion with ward councillors to inform future areas, and we want to have wider community engagement with residents and businesses. And I think, and again, it might be something that we come on and touch on this evening, is more clarity on how we're selecting areas and the thought process that goes into that. We want to continue to collect people's sort of perceptions to help shape where those areas might be, and start to move forward to a more community co-design approach in the development of some of the schemes, and making sure that early engagement, particularly around the equalities impact of schemes, happens at an early stage. Just to finish, as I said, remind people that this is not a singular intervention, it's part of a borough-wide approach. It's always been part of the strategy, and we think that it's by piecing together the different interventions that over the next future generations will really fundamentally change how people travel and make local journeys. That concludes my presentation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And just let everyone know that report, I believe, is available online for everyone. I hope.
These slides, sorry.
Yeah. Or the report itself.
Sorry, which report?
No, what you just shown us.
It was distributed. We had it.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. No, I just wanted it public to access them as well. But no, that's fine, thanks. Before we carry on, can I just introduce Councillor Mahmoud Akinsoyu, who's now in the building. Mahmoud, do you want to introduce yourself to the public?
Hi, I'm Mahmoud's Councillor Mahmoud Akinsoyu. I'm Councillor for Southbury Ward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mahmoud. And apologies, I've got to early introduce two other officers here. We got Sarah Carey, who is the Executive Director of Place and also the leader of the Council National College Scum. So welcome. Okay, panel. As I said earlier, I'll open it up. Can you please just only ask 2 questions in this round, and then we'll open up later on. So who can you just tell me who would like to sort of ask a few questions, and I'll put you down. No one wants to ask any questions?
Councillor Maria Alexandru.
Thank you, Maria. Anyone else at this point?
Councillor Gunawardene, sir.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Councillor Aksanoglu.
Thank you, Mahmood.
Thank you.
Councillor Rawlings.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Councillor Anderson, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay. Okay, Maria, if you want to start your 2 questions now. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, first I want to say that I do support school streets because I think they're a great way of helping parents and children to walk to school, and I think that would actually deal with the traffic in the mornings and in the afternoons, and I think they're quite successful. But this thing about improving air quality, what I've seen, and I've had hundreds and hundreds of emails, which I'm sure Richard Eason knows because I send them all to him, it's done the opposite. It has actually created traffic and pollution, and we've seen that not just in this borough, in other boroughs, and that's why many boroughs are, he mentioned lots of boroughs have LTNs. Well, a lot of boroughs are taking them out for that very reason, and I don't understand why he hasn't put pollution monitors to track it. And they cannot use the pandemic as an excuse, because Wandsworth Council, they had an LTN. They closed 11 roads. They had pollution monitors around those roads. Now, what they found was that pollution went up, and when they took those LTNs out, they found that pollution went down because they were actually tracking the pollution level. So they have evidence there. So I don't understand why the council isn't doing that. So this is what they should be doing. How do we know if the pollution is going up or down if they're not monitoring? So I think this is something, it's no excuse. If it's been done by one council, Enfield Council I think should be doing it as well, just so that we know, and they'll find obviously that traffic will be it has gone up, the pollution has gone up. I think it's a failure there, so I think they should be doing that. Now, according to the King's College report, 33% of Londoners live near busy roads. Now, if you're pushing all the traffic there, where people live, are they not breathing in all that traffic, all those traffic fumes and all that pollution? Are we not then giving people a worse quality of life? And during a pandemic, isn't that the worst thing we're doing? So I'd like to understand the logic. Now, also, why on earth do we have an LTN in Fox Lane when the Mayor's Street Space for London's Strategic Neighbourhood Analysis put this area in the lowest category for suitability, namely traffic filtering, schools, deprivation and car ownership? So there was no reason to put an LTN in Fox Lane. So I'd like to understand the logic. If it's street space, plenty of street space in Winchmore Hill. It was absolutely unsuitable. So there's my 2 questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Would someone like to reply to Maria's questions?
Yep, Councillor. So I think in terms of air quality, we are monitoring air quality, and what we're using is an approach that's you know, a very common approach across London, where we're using building a model, and we have external consultants who are building that model, who will input traffic data into that so that they can compare with some modelling before the scheme was implemented, and compare with how the area and the air quality is perhaps impacted post implementation, and the results of that air quality modelling will help then inform the picture. Now, I think it's fair to say that if you're looking to reassign traffic back onto the primary road network, that you'll see there'll be potentially some impacts particularly maybe where there's junctions on that primary network. And then we'll have to consider that air quality being one of the factors of the monitoring, amongst the potential for a wider area potentially seeing more benefits. So we'll have to wait to see what the results are for that. But I don't think it's not that we're not monitoring air quality, and I think that building a model to do it is arguably a more robust way of understanding that than the placement of some diffusion tubes or some other type of mechanisms that you can use. In terms of Fox Lane, I think I've set out the long conversation that's been happening with the residents of Fox Lane, and I think I'd go back to what I talked about previously about this not being a singular intervention. So what we need to consider, if we're trying to change over the longer term how people move around, then we've got to think about their everyday journeys, and you've got to think about their door-to-door destinations. So the council has invested, as many will know, in high-quality segregated infrastructure on some of its key primary roads. Green Lanes is one of those, for example. But yet residents living either side of those have got to feel safe and confident enough to leave their front door and be able to access that infrastructure. And in some areas, such as like some of the roads in Fox Lane, which we're seeing high levels of motor vehicles cutting through, that's creating an environment that's not conducive to encouraging people to travel in a more active way. So one of our earlier thoughts was that what we should look at doing is piloting some of these low traffic type neighbourhood approaches to residential areas that are adjacent to some of that earlier investment with the cycle lanes. So that hopefully gives some insight into the rationale by why that area was looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much, Richard. Chair, if you want to ask your questions.
Yes, thanks, Richard, for the presentation. I had just a couple of questions. One is on the reduced accidents. Did we consider 20 miles an hour limits? I understand we had about 40 accidents in the 10 years in Fox Lane, for example, one serious accident. And from what I understand, when you cut the speeds down to 20 miles an hour, that goes really down by about 50 or 60%. So I was just wondering whether, as a transition step in terms of managing the reductions, whether that was considered, because also the air quality doesn't get worse by slowing of the traffic. So that was one question. And then the other question is also, if you take something like the Southgate roundabout, at the end of the consultation process or the evaluation of the things, either there will be a solution for the Southgate roundabout or there won't be. And what a lot of the residents are asking is, if it proves to be really continues to be this bad, what are the type of ideas that are out there which will try to mitigate the situation there? Because that is causing a lot of traffic on some of the main roads where there are residents who are living there. Particularly from an equality point of view, those are the roads with lower value housing and stuff, a lot of flats and things. So a lot of the victims, certainly of the ones who are facing the consequences of the Fox Lane low traffic neighborhood, are the ones with the poorer households. So I know we don't have the results yet. What people are keen to know is, if it continues to be bad, how do we address that? So it's really those sort of thinking. It's worth sharing it in advance rather than waiting for it till the scheme assessment is finished. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Someone like to answer Chav's questions?
Yes, Chair, I'll answer those. So I think in terms of 20 mile an hour limits, I think certainly within Fox Lane, the roads, so the trial includes 20 mile an hour limits within the roads within the area. And we've also introduced, I think the same for Bowes, introduced some 20-mile-an-hour limits. And I certainly think that's something for Connaught Gardens. Officers have been asked by Cabinet members to look at 20-mile-an-hour limits more broadly, and whether there are other areas where they may be appropriate, and that's something that's being looked at currently. In terms of Southgate roundabout, we could look at different options for Southgate roundabout. I think that it's fair to say that any changes to that type of junction, it's a major junction, would require significant funding, and we would have to go through a series of feasibility studies to understand what might be possible. I think there's been some consideration of that in the past. But as you say, I appreciate what you're saying about not waiting to see what the impact is, but we really do need to get a good understanding of what the level of impact is, how many more vehicles a day are passing through there at the peak hours compared to how it was operating previously, to be able to not just inform what might be the right next steps, but to start to build a case for the potential to secure other funding, to look at some other measures that might be a bit more transformative. I know I think that maybe the leader might want to talk about the wider area, the things that are happening in Southgate. Officers have been with the leader having a conversation with the community about things that might want to bring forward in that area. That's all I have.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Koshan, do you want to add to that?
Sorry, I'm trying to come off mute. I mean, I think I'd just reiterate what Richard said. It's really important that when we make decisions about the schemes, both in terms of amending them, but also any decision to make anything final, that those decisions are based on facts that we can assess. Both the LTNs are trials, but also, I mean, just to directly address the point around the Southgate roundabout, I think it is an important point to raise. There are long-term issues associated with that roundabout. It was raised a number of times with me when I recently did a walkabout at Southgate High Street. One of the challenges, as I understand it, is that roundabout is I don't know if the correct term is listed, but it's under some sort of heritage, and so there are limitations as to the changes that can be made to the shape, to the flow of the traffic. I'm pausing because I hope I haven't misremembered that, Richard. But as I understand it, that the shape of the roundabout itself is part of the original design of the station. It's part of the overall kind of listed look. So.
I think there are some. I'd have to go away and have a look into that in more detail, but I think there are some heritage issues with any sort of interventions around the tube station. But I'd need to look into further specifically what they might be. Yeah,
I'm almost certain, Chair, but if it's wrong, we'll make sure that we let members know. It's stuck in my mind because an obvious solution might be to change the shape of that. In fact, Councillor Acharif may know himself better. A solution might be to change the shape of that roundabout, but we are limited, and because it was such an unusual response we had from TfL, it seems to have been etched in my mind.
I mean, Haas, can I have a follow-up to Richard, or quick one?
Go ahead, Acharif.
Thanks, yeah. Richard, so I think the question is,
can really your video on when you're speaking, thank you.
I'm on, yeah?
Yeah, your video, can.
It is on, yeah.
No, see you, but never mind, we can hear you.
Yeah, the question was, I understand we need to wait for the results, but normally what people have is some rough plans in advance. So it might be really bad, 100% bad, or 50% less, or zero. So you have some ideas. And what residents are asking is because they don't think, because it's a through road there, that the traffic will significantly go down. So they are saying, what happens if it's still half the amount of traffic from now, or still at 100% what we are getting today? So they really want to know roughly what are the ideas there, because just to say wait like this without even any concept for a year or whatever the period is, it's pretty unsatisfactory. So it's nice to get some ideas to say, if it continues, these are the options we have to consider. And I think I asked that question last time, even from Councillor Barnes, and I'm not getting an answer to calm the residents down. They're asking a fair question, and it's important that we give that.
I mean, I think to be fair, Richard has answered it, which is we've got the trials continuing, the evidence is being gathered, but I absolutely recognise that ward councillors will be getting correspondence from residents who might want to know what the next stage is and what the options are. Perhaps, Richard, we need to go off and reflect on that, and even if we are unable to give a certain answer because that's just the process, perhaps we can do some engagement to give residents some further assurance that they haven't been forgotten about. So we will absolutely take that on board. And Councillor, if there are any particular ways of engagement that you think are helpful, particular roads that we should write to, or you want to have a meeting, I think officers should facilitate that.
Okay.
And maybe just maybe we could look to to hold a webinar not dissimilar to what we're doing for Bowes. Maybe we could do that in the Fox Lane area in the future. And these are some of the specific issues that we could talk through.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. It's good to know that we are communicating with people. Thank you. Mahmoud, do you want to ask your questions now?
Hi, Chair. I think Councillor Alexandra actually asked the main question, but I just wanted to get to know how we came to the conclusion of the specific locations that we're actually using in the low traffic neighbourhood. So ourselves and our residents know the whole process, the initial process, because I'm pretty sure, I mean, there's many positive things that the LTNs are going to bring, and I'm pretty sure that residents would want to know exactly how they can engage and make sure that they specifically specify some locations back to the council. So if Richard could obviously address how we came to those conclusions in relation to the roads, and then my question was asked before as well. I just wanted to see an initial thought of how the monitoring is actually going. I know we haven't got any figures at the moment, but more or less, I mean, we must have some kind of idea of how it's going. So if Richard could answer those questions, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Councillor. Chair, shall I respond to those?
Yes.
So I think in terms of how we chose the areas, so I think the as I touched on, the idea is that the original plan was that the quiet enabled interventions, which might include low traffic neighbourhood type features, would follow the same pattern of the major investment schemes that we were doing on the major corridors, so on green lanes, but also along the Hertford Road, where we again have put in many kilometres of segregated infrastructure and improved a number of pedestrian crossings, increased pedestrian crossing points, and generally improved the safety of those roads. I think it's fair to say that whole process of installing those that infrastructure took longer than perhaps was originally anticipated in the original bid, and Councillor Anderson might have a view on that. And so I think, but the original work that we started in Fox Lane all those years ago was based on that premise. And therefore we wanted to continue. We'd started that conversation and we wanted to continue it, and that was the conversation where it was more developed. And in order to follow through with that community engagement, we wanted to keep having that conversation rather than then choose a new area. In terms of bows, again, on the basis of many years of residents raising concerns, particularly those residents on Warwick Road, who were, I think, suffering particularly from people, motorists choosing just to save, a couple of minutes really, by cutting off that corner of the North Cirque and cutting through that, that what is a, residential street. Again, the pleas that we were hearing from both the community and, and I think, ward councillors were certainly keen to see some action in that area. And so when the opportunity came up for some funding, we opted to look at that area. I do think that we're learning as we're delivering these schemes, and I think there's an opportunity to reflect on these trials and to have another think about how we move forward and where we move forward, and have a wider set of engagement to see again what the community feel about where the areas might be to focus next, but also from an officer perspective, I think we can bring more clarity to the criteria that we might want to consider in order to if you like, assess a particular area. And I think that there are a number of factors that need to be considered. Now, current volume of traffic, current speed of traffic may be one, a look at the accident, rates maybe another, that community's accessibility to other transport choices, might be another one. So there'll be a whole series of different ways that we can make that assessment. And I think we've more work to do to set those out, and so that there's a more clear rationale for future projects. And I think there'll be more opportunity for the community to be involved in that discussion. In terms of how the schemes are going at the moment, as I think I've covered it, it's too early for us to report at the moment. The traffic is clearly in a completely different place than it would be in normal times. So we couldn't come forward at the moment with any sort of reliable assessment to say, well, actually the impact on the surrounding roads is negligible and it's all fine, or that there's a constant constant gridlock in the area. It's just we're not able to make that assessment with travel patterns affected so hugely as a result of COVID. So I appreciate that people are want to know more, but we just have to wait until the recovery starts to kick in, and then we can start doing some more traffic monitoring. So I'm sorry that I can't provide sort of more detail at this time.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. I'm trying to make I'm trying to remain completely impartial here, but I will say that a lot of the mail that we had that love the scheme are from Warwick Road residents. So clearly, it is working for some people. Anyway, Lindsay, do you want to ask your questions now?
Yeah, thank you. Mine starts really was an email that we had from a resident who lives just outside the Fox Lane LTN scheme. It's actually written in to say what, and I'm interested in this as well, so it's not just from him, what pre-LTN data has been collected to benchmark the 4 benefits being claimed through the experiment, and what targets need to be hit to declare the experiment a success. And he's saying that the 4 benefits will reduce accidents, improve air quality, improve health and well-being, and enhance the feeling of community. And he said he did actually ask a question and was told that there wasn't that much data imposition of the LTNs, so he not too sure how they're going to be judged a success or failure, and particularly on the last one, enhanced feeling of community, which does seem to be rather airy-fairy in a way. I'm not saying it is, but I just wondered how you're going to actually register that and actually measure that with it all. The second question I have is a comment as well as a question. I used to travel down the Mall, how do you pronounce it, near enough every day when I lived in Edmonton. It wasn't a cut through, it was actually the direct route from my house to dropping off my children at Garfield Primary School and then going to work. They were collected by my parents because I was working full time. And that was the route through. And during the whole of that time that I did it, there were speed humps in that road. There was no possibility, I know, of going more than 20 miles an hour unless you speeded up in between them, and they're quite a few of them down there. I also did a lot on the green at Christchurch, Southgate and the Walker ground. So it was literally my route going through. So, and I'm sure a lot of the traffic there with Waterfall Road, etc., it's not a cut through as such, it's a direct route that they're using. And as I say, it had speed humps in it for donkey's years. Some of them are worn away in places. I just wondered, again, I presume it's because you would have had more traffic going down there, but I'm just wondering, you know, I've no idea how I would have got to drop them with kids at school and then get into work on time if I'd had to go via Southgate or via Green Lanes through Palmer's Green, etc., to sort of do that trip. And I'm just wondered, you know, why that route was chosen when, I say, it had speed humps in it for years to slow traffic down. So that's two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Would someone like to reply to Lindsay?
Yeah, Councillor, I'll reply initially, at least. So I think for Fox Lane, we do have baseline data, and I think it's published on the project page, certainly in terms of traffic's both speeds and volume. So we've got that, and both to understand the current volume of traffic that's going through that area. So we'll be able to determine you know, changes there. As I've touched on before, in terms of the air quality, we'll then be able to use that data to make some assessments on the air quality as well. I think the idea is that you know, the Enfield has a health and well-being strategy. One of the core elements of that is to enable people to be more active. I think, you know, we are monitoring, you know, so certainly on some of our cycle routes, for example, the numbers of people who are cycling, and we are seeing increases in the number of people cycling. There's probably a range of contributing factors towards that, but nonetheless, you know, particularly in the Palmer's Green area, we are seeing an upward trend, and I think, you know, based on that, and it's still, you know, there's a long way to go, but we have to, it's through connecting and building the network and adding on different types of inventions that will see that increase. I think we can, you know, make some assumptions around the overall community's health and well-being. In terms of sort of community cohesion thing, in some of the other schemes that where we've done the perception surveys, for example, in Bowes, that's some of the questions that we've asked. Actually, we've asked questions about you know, how well you know, how well do you know your neighbours? How often are you talking to them? I can't recall the exact questions, but it's to try to get, and they are perceptions. So I think, as Councillor Rawlings said, it's not hard and fact sort of scientific data, but I think we can poll people on their views on how they feel about the area and whether significantly reducing the speed and volume of traffic is having an impact on their quality of life. So I think you know, there's more studies that we need to do around that, but I think we can make some assessments. There are not set, we do get asked this, there are not set in order to be a success in this measure, you've got to reach this particular metric, because these things are complicated. There are a multitude of different factors that need to get assessed and be considered as part of the monitoring approach, and that's the purpose of the report that will be produced towards the end of the trial, where it brings together all of those elements into a report and sets those out, and then it's the job then of, you know, of elected members to make some decisions based on the information that officers present as to what they feel is the right thing to do, and how these projects contribute to the climate change action work, how they contribute to the health and well-being strategy, I think will be something that needs to be considered alongside the hard data that we collect as part of the monitoring. In terms of the MAL, well, I would the MAL does have speed humps. Again, I haven't got access to the data, but the MAL is one of the roads that some residents on there would say suffered the most, and I'm sure on the MAL there are some residents who are delighted with the scheme, and there are some residents who don't like the scheme, because as well as preventing cut through traffic, it does also impact the way that they can move in and out of the area. So there will be different views, but the MAL was seeing a lot of traffic. Speed humps are an intervention that attempt to slow people down. A lot of residents, have told me many times that they hate speed humps. They can cause the noise issues. A lot of when we've proposed speed humps in other areas, people are up in arms about them. But clearly they're designed to slow speeds. You do sometimes see then between, and this was an interesting issue that we saw with the existing trial, I think, was this essence of between humps, for example, people speeding up to the next one, slowing down, go over the hump, speeding up. You can see that, and we don't think that these schemes are not they're not intended to be traffic calming schemes. We are looking to try to encourage over the long term, alternative ways for people to travel some of those short journeys. And if you're going on a longer journey, that's where your destination is not within the area but on the other side of it, then using the perimeter roads and the primary road network, we feel is the right way to approach that.
Yeah, thank you. Lindsay, do you have any follow-up to that? Are you okay with the answers?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Daniel, do you want to ask your initial questions?
Thank you, Chair. Well, a lot of things have been raised. I want to sort of pick up though on the point that Richard, you in your previous, in response to Lindsay rulings, you rather surprisingly said in question to effectively KPIs, key performance indicators, that it's much more complex than that, and you suggested there weren't such clear identification criteria prior to installing this scheme, or these schemes rather, and you said that there's sort of a range of complex considerations that need to be undertaken and will form part of a report. The problem is, of course, on that basis, it's rather difficult to determine on what basis you're actually assessing the success or otherwise of a scheme. If you've got criteria which is rather like shifting sand and it's not fixed in any way, what are you comparing to? You would expect there to be clear criteria before, during and after to determine how successful a project is. And of course, your presentation, if I may say, you've given us the summary of what with the schemes in general, but full well that there's considerable differences of opinion and strong opposition to that. About, for instance, there was a 1,600 signed petition calling for the Bow scheme to be withdrawn, and you made mention, and it has been said, that there's strong call. You mentioned Warwick Roads as an example, and I could say equally in the Fox Lane, Old Park Road and Devonshire Road were very strong advocates to these schemes, but there are many other residents who have strongly different views and oppositional views to these schemes. So the difficulty is, it does appear that certain people who shouted quite loud did seem to get their positions favoured, and those who were clearly less supportive have seemingly not had such a favourable position. And I recognise the fact that you're trying to come up with schemes, and it's interesting you did say about you're not seeking, you just responded saying you're not seeking traffic calming, but effectively different measures, which is of course the original proposals of Quieter Neighbours was about traffic calming. So you've acknowledged the shift. My questions to you are very simply this. One thing I'm not exactly clear on is there seems to be a shift in argument. Previously, we were told the purpose of these schemes was to effectively that traffic would evaporate, that there wouldn't be any displacement. Effectively, traffic evaporates, even though much of the evidence says that at best about 11 or 12% of traffic actually does in practice, and much of the rest of it does get displaced onto other roads. Now we seem to be hearing a shift in argument which says it's deliberately aimed to displace traffic onto main roads. So there's a sort of shift in argument. And of course, the main roads do have a lot of people on there. Most of accidents do occur on main roads. And if you are shifting onto main roads, then obviously there's more likely to be a risk that more people could get injured, not least. Obviously, on the main roads, people use buses, kids use buses, and they have to cross the roads. And therefore, there's a strong chance if there's more vehicles on those roads that more accidents could occur. So I'm concerned about the shifting arguments on that one. And the second point is, Richard, obviously there's been a lot of talk in the last week or so over the article in The Guardian, which was this featuring the research from which looked at these schemes, and it was quite critical of the Enfield proposals, not least it's the suggestion it was put that it singled out Enfield, focusing on boroughs' more affluent areas, resulting what the researchers determined to be the least equitable across all the different districts that there might be. And I think that's obviously a concern. And I noticed in the response from the administration, it was said that there's a lot of investment that's been taking place in segregated cycling on the 8 and 10 north. Well, obviously, those were originally schemes as part of the Cycle Enfield proposal, which are now coming to fruition. But that's, of course, very different to these LTNs. And much of the focus, as you're now coming forward with Connaught Gardens, is also in the west. So they all seem to be very much into those areas. And there is no evidence, unless you can point to me otherwise, which shows the compound impact of LTNs across one another. It all seems to be based on an LTN in isolation, but you've got three in close proximity, all quite different. And Bowes, obviously, is a different scheme entirely and has much more negative consequences to residents in those areas because they're sandwiched between the A406 and Bounds Green Road. So the impact in there is quite considerable. So I'd like your views on those 2 points. Obviously, one about the changing arguments regarding to traffic displacement or as opposed to traffic evaporation, and the other about the seemingly focus on the west of the borough as opposed to the east, and the fact it does seem to, and there are obviously very different needs in those different areas, and those who seem to have shouted loudest from certain roads have got more favourable treatment than those who are perhaps not represented by this, who've seemingly been ignored. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Daniel. Would someone like to reply to Daniel's questions?
I'm happy to address the political points. Do you want to go first, Richard, if there's anything? How should we do this?
Well, if you go first, Councillor, and then I can follow up.
Okay, all right, and then you can fill in the bits that with the technical stuff that is accurate. So the first thing to reiterate is the administration's commitment to a number of different things, not least our commitment to improve air quality, to make the lived environment more pleasant for residents, to see the overall number of cars in future years not increase, but hopefully decrease. And all of that is to do with improving health and well-being. It's why, for example, even previous administrations have made commitments around sustainable travel, etc. The reasons for those are well rehearsed, they're well documented, they feature in a number of strategic documents for the administration, Health and Wellbeing Board work, the corporate plan, the Administrative Labour Manifesto, even our housing and growth strategy. There are a number of key documents where our commitment to improving the quality of life through improving the environment is central to what we do. So they've been well rehearsed previously. The point around reducing traffic overall versus traffic displacement, those two things are not incompatible. We know that the number of cars will increase in coming years in Enfield, and so everything we do is about trying to reduce vehicles on the road, especially for short journeys. Without doing that, we genuinely risk all of our roads being clogged up. And the reality is that major artillery roads, main roads, are the most suitable roads for vehicles to use and not residential roads. But the key thing is wanting residents to not use their car for short journeys, because, and this is where the councillor does have a point, actually, if we don't do something about the overall numbers, then, as I said, all the roads will be blocked up. And the schemes that are being implemented are very much about encouraging people not to be in their cars for short journeys, but acknowledge that main roads will need to be used for those longer journeys. In terms of where the schemes are being trialled, areas that we're looking at, the point that has been made a number of times about affluent areas benefiting from schemes, I think I'm really pleased that some are acknowledging that the schemes have benefits. That we have consistently as an administration said that school streets, low traffic neighbourhoods, these are schemes that have a place across the borough. But really, we have to be able to manage the workload, B, acknowledge that schemes can be disruptive, and therefore having 50 odd schemes across the borough is an unwise thing to do. If we had done that, I'm pretty sure members of this committee would be saying, why on earth have you done so many at the same time? And then the third is, it's about also responding to what residents are asking. When I became leader, it was very clear that there were residents in Fox Lane area, in the Bowes area, that had for a number of years made representation to the local authority. Now, had residents in other parts of Enfield not made that representation or call? I'm sure they did, but up until that point, the local authority had probably done most of the engagement in the two areas that I refer to, and so it felt appropriate to begin there. The point about kind of overall strategic planning and not just seeing schemes in isolation, I entirely agree with that point. So if you take, for example, the work that the council officers are doing with offices at Haringey, it's about trying to say, look, even borough boundaries are not real. You've got some things in the pipeline. We've got some things in the pipeline, and we are trialling. Can we have a collaborative approach? And sometimes that works well, and when it doesn't, political leadership and commitment from various local authorities get together and say, actually, we want collaborative working. I know that the leader of Haringey won't mind me saying we have both committed, as have the relevant cabinet members, to saying to our respective officers, we would like you to work together so there can be a comprehensive kind of look at a wider area. I think that's probably it, Chair, other than just to reiterate, our commitments around health and well-being, air quality, looking to reduce car usage, not least because of air quality, but also obesity reasons. All of those things are multiple reasons, and they are all good reasons. Richard, I don't know if I've missed something technical that you might want to comment on.
No, I don't think so, Councillor. Other than, yeah, I wouldn't accept that there's a change in arguments. I think all of the points that you've set out and the reason why and the case for change that we've got here, that we're all sort of articulated quite eloquently in original bid work when the cycle investment work began. They all remain. If anything, the necessity to address those things, become
the only other thing I guess I would say, Richard, sorry to interrupt, is it is true, as the trials continue, different residents and groups might raise different concerns, and so it's not, I acknowledge that we might spend some time talking about one aspect of the benefits versus another week where we talk about something else. It doesn't negate all the other reasons. It's just, it is our effort to be able to be as transparent as possible and provide the rationale. And that rationale is in two parts. One is the evidential basis for some of this decision, and the other part is a political commitment. And I understand that some people might not agree with that political commitment. That's fine, that's just how things are. But we do have an obligation to present both, the kind of technical reasons and also the political commitments too.
Thank you, Councillor. Ricky, do you want to add anything, or are you happy?
I'll just say, in terms of I think there was some narrative at the beginning around how we will judge the schemes. We've got a set of aspects that we're monitoring for the scheme that will be included in the report. We've talked about a number of those in terms of air quality, but also whether we think it's having an impact on people, helping to more people walk and cycle. The equalities impact, of course, is going to be a key one. So there may be some things, continue collaboration with the emergency services and their perspective. There may be some things that when we take the assessment, that there's one thing that actually doesn't matter how how the scheme is performing in these areas. If this is one thing that means that we need to lead a decision to do X or to do Y, then that's the purpose of pulling together things into a report, and not saying at this stage that there's a particular benchmark that you're trying to reach for each aspect. And of course, we need to accept, along with the cycle lanes and all the interventions, this is a long-term behaviour change programme. This is not about seeing results overnight, and the decisions and the approach that we take now will define how things unfold in the future.
And Chair, just for transparency, I mean, look, it is fair to say that we've had representation from councillors in Edmonton and in the eastern part of the borough who have made the very point, look, our residents are asking about possible schemes for these areas. Does the council have plans? How is that going to be rolled out? And we have said consistently we need to do that engagement with the residents, but I have to be honest and say yes, we have had requests from other parts of the borough too, and I know Richard's team is looking at possible work programmes where there are schemes that we can consider, but it is very, very early days.
Yes, I know there's other sort of requests about LTNs where I live in Southfield. Yeah, thank you. Daniel, are you okay with those answers for now?
Well, just one point. I mean, firstly, I thank both Richard and Councillor Cunningham for giving, genuine answers, which believe. What my question, I suppose, my overriding point is, when this is being assessed, it seems to be the criteria that's being used is, and I think Councillor Cunningham just said, a political judgment, and I think that's true. I mean, if it's a political judgment, then effectively any decision will be framed around a belief in a whole series of criteria, and the evidence will sort of work along that criteria. And clearly there is a movement by the mayor of London and so forth to push these programs. That's not the same as saying if an independent analysis suggested something different, that a different decision could be taken. It does seem to be there is a political drive, and that's an honest answer, and I can accept that. We can disagree, but it does seem to be very much a political consensus, if you like, on that way of thinking. Then that's the way to do it, rather than taking out any political judgments and looking at it purely on the light of evidence, experience, impacts, and all the other factors, which would be the criteria you generally say would be an honest scientific approach. If it's a political decision first and foremost, that will determine very much the outcome or potential outcome of where you go next. But thank you. So, I mean,
look, all our decisions as an administration, as with every council across the country, are political ones. That's just the truth. Decisions that we make around investment in adult social care are political ones. Decisions we make about investment in regeneration projects are political ones. The decision I made to set up a Poverty and Equality Commission was a political one. Our decision to take action with traffic schemes was a political one, because we are committed to cleaner air, because we want to meet carbon targets, because we want to reduce the number of cars. So in that sense, yes, all our decisions that we make as an administration is driven by our commitment to try and reduce inequality in the borough. But as with any decision that we make, we rely on the professionalism, the knowledge, the long-term experience of officers in the local authority, who, as the councillor will know, advise us, who present evidence to us, and ultimately allow us to make a judgment. And as I say, this is how decisions are made at a local authority. We allow for trial periods, we allow for evidence to be gathered, and then ultimately it is up for a politician not to duck, Not to say I'm going to push an officer at the front so that they can be attacked instead. Not to wash their hands of the responsibility, but to say actually we have belief in our convictions, that the evidence is sound, that we trust the judgment of officers, their advice, and we will weigh up based on a political framework that we have. So it's not unusual. That's how we make decisions at a local authority. That's how councils implement schemes. And you know, if people don't agree with the political commitments that we've made to health and wellbeing and reducing inequality, that's really for them. I can only express the commitments of the administration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. No, I'm not going to ask any questions myself, but a Chase resident has written to me. So, as my duty as a local councillor, I'm just going to ask 2 questions as well. The first one: is there any adequate, warning at the end or beginning of Amberley Road to tell motorists not to use Amberley, which is in effect a no-through road to motorists going to Waterfall or Cannons? There should be a sign. My journey was probably about 3 miles longer. This builds up, if repeated, of other non-local and occasional drivers. Right. Question 2 is, what makes Fox Lane LTN different from any other privileged gated community? Would anyone like to answer those questions?
Yeah, so if I in terms of the Amberley question, so we are there is signage throughout the area that that provides advanced warning to suggest that there's no longer access to some of the roads through the area that there was. There's not one of those on every road. I do accept that again, these are, it's not an insignificant change when you put a scheme like this in. And in those early days, I would have thought that most people have by now have become accustomed to it. But in those early days, people are used to habitually taking a particular route, and despite various advanced warning signs and temporary signs, that some people will come across it and it will come to them as a surprise. Over time, I think there are other estates in the borough where people just never drive into because you can't get out the other side, and they've been designed like that from conception, and people don't sort of wander in there. So I do feel over time people will and I would have anticipated by now, broadly got used to the layout of the trial, and I think that's why, again, we're in unusual times because of lockdown. But that's why it's very difficult. It can be troublesome in those early weeks as people are trying to get used to it. If there are places where we feel that there should be more signage, then I'm happy for the team to have a look at that, so we can go and look more specifically and in detail at that particular issue. But there is signage out, and that is part of the trial as well, and people can put that input into the consultation. But if you pass that on to me, Councillor, I'll have a look at that quite specific thing.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. I'll say MBQ or whatever. Thank you. Second question about is Fox Lane a privileged gated community?
Well, I think the approach with the low traffic neighbourhood approach means that if that particular residential area is seeing a lot of through traffic, then this is one of the approaches to help address that for all the reasons that we've covered. There are then disbenefits, and I think this is for the residents who are living in those areas. And I think a number of residents in the current areas that we're looking at who are in the area don't believe that the benefits that the scheme brings outweigh the disbenefits, predominantly the disbenefit being the fact that their own access is restricted or is limited because they've now got to either come in and out of the area via particular ways. So I think that those residents would probably have a view that this is not some kind of gated community in a sort of positive sense. So there are a range of different views on the schemes. I think we've gone through why we've identified Fox Lane, and I think we've covered that there are other areas that we need to look at in the future.
But I mean, if I could just add, Chair, I mean, the example that Richard gave around kind of new developments and how a lot of effort is put into the design of new, say, you know, estates, seeks to stop vehicles going in and then throughout the other way. So there is a kind of a general consensus view that good design doesn't encourage vehicle kind of rat running, so to speak. And you know, the reality is we have existing kind of roads and properties and dwellings, and we're trying to amend traffic schemes or implement things that will create what are better environments. And I absolutely acknowledge, you know, there would have been disruption for some residents. We know that. That's the nature of traffic schemes. But, you know, I just reiterate, this is not an administration that is a do-nothing administration. There have been a number of years where, you know, residents have repeatedly raised issues with us. And, you know, instead of just ignoring them, putting our fingers in our ears and saying we're not going to do something because it's just too tough, what we're saying is let's try something that could deliver a tangible improvement to your quality of life.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we've got another 10 minutes left as part of debating time. So would any other panelists like to ask another question?
Could I ask more questions, please? Councillor Maria Alexandru.
Then indeed, Maria.
Yeah.
You can go first. You know,
Councillor Anderson as well. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Maria, you can ask your question, but you mustn't hog the last 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try not to. First of all, why weren't the businesses contacted? Because as far as I know, they were just totally ignored. And why did it take the council 6 months to contact blue badge holders? They should have been contacted straight away, because the biggest impact would have been on them. Now, I've been hearing things like committed to clean air, there's some disruption. Well, some disruption, we're talking about adding 40 minutes to your travel journey. That's a huge disruption and we can't make light of it. Now, why didn't the council bring more school streets? They only brought in 12. Islington brought in 39 last year. That may have had a better impact and improved the air quality. The council was seriously committed to air quality and improving the air. Maybe that's what they should have brought in. That would have had a huge impact. Why not bring in a bike scheme? Why not bring scooter trials? Because I've heard the word sustainable travel, and yes, I think we should encourage more people to get out of their cars, but we should also offer alternatives. Now, to bring this scheme in during a pandemic, when people want to be in their cars, and you don't blame them when it's probably a safe way to travel because people are scared, obviously, they're not going to use the bus. Some people cannot walk, so what do you want them to do? So I think it would have been better if the council looked at alternative modes of transport as well. So I hope that's something the council will look at. But as for their commitment to clean air, I think they've got a long way to go. But if they can really look at, I'd like to know their programme on Healthy Street, because I think that's something that they should roll out in a big way, like Islington. Thanks.
Great, thank you, and it's really good to hear a councillor praising a fellow Labour authority. I entirely agree with school streets.
Well, I am comparing them to you.
So I'm very happy that you're praising them, and we like to take good practice from other Labour authorities. So you're entirely right, councillor, that school streets, I think, of whole, and not all have been perfect. I think there are still teething issues with those too, but they have been welcomed, and indeed we will seek to do that. But the LTNs are something different, and they're not the same thing. But doing one doesn't mean you don't do the other. But I absolutely take the spirit in which your comments, I think, were made, which is that they are welcome, that residents like them, generally speaking, like the kind of teething issues. And if councillors, and it sounds like that might be the kind of feedback from this committee, is that we should speed up some of our rollouts of school streets. Very happy to, for me to say to Richard, actually, let's look at some additional areas. And if there are specific examples that councillors have. You know, perhaps there are locations in your own wards where you think, you know, this is a no-brainer, we should have one here. Flag that to officers, and we will look to try and accelerate that. You know, of course, we have to do things sensibly. We have to not overpromise, because, you know, there are resource implications. But, you know, I can't be any clearer than saying, you know, absolutely endorse kind of comments made about school streets. In terms of, can I just comment around commitment? You know, I'm not going to rehearse the things I've said around commitments to air pollution. I think our strategies and political statements made in the past are very clear on that. And by no means does Enfield Council kind of is doing everything. We can always do more, and we will always strive to improve. That's just a given. And so when ideas come through about other sustainable modes of transport, I welcome them. You know, we seek to secure additional funding from government whenever we can. I pay tribute to Richard and his team for being able to secure grants, kind of really obscure ones as well sometimes, to be able to allow us to deliver things, particularly around sustainable travel. But, you know, there are, these things cost money, and so we have to make sure that when we make commitments, we can also follow up by delivery. My final point is around short journeys, because I think, you know, Councillor is absolutely right that the pandemic has seen a difficult period with the number of vehicles on the road increasing. I think that's a fact. I think the evidence shows that for London and across the country. These are highly, highly unusual circumstances. But most of the car usage in Enfield is for short journeys. That's my understanding. And so we have to continue to do everything we can to encourage people not to use the car for short journeys. That is very different than saying that a car should never be used. It has never been my position that cars should never be used, because as the council rightly points out, there are some residents who will need to use their car. But it is precisely because those residents need to use their car that everybody else that can do a journey that is a short journey shouldn't use their car. And it is our responsibility as a local authority to design schemes that will help deliver that behavioural change. Richard, do you want to comment on the consultation bit? Because I think there are really important points that the council has raised, you know, about engagement with businesses and specifically about blue badge holders, because I think it's the council's right. They're two important points.
Yes, and I'll, conscious of time, Chair, I'll be brief. But businesses have not been ignored. So businesses are able and have been, you know, received the information on the consultation. Within the consultation itself, there's an opportunity for them to identify themselves as a business who works within the area or as a business who operates, you know, outside of the area, so that we can home in on the issues and the points that they're raising. And so it's important that they continue to, you know, to engage with us through that process. So I don't accept that they've been ignored, and they won't be ignored as we review that information going forward. In terms of blue badge holders, yeah, letters have gone out. I wish we'd have done that sooner. We had some issues around that with GDPR that did slow us down, but it would have been preferable to have sent those out earlier. And I think that's something, you know, key takeaway for future schemes. We have, of course, the within the consultation, there's always been the equalities impact assessment, series of equalities impact assessment questions within that, and a number of people have been providing these insights through that process. But I think the approach of writing directly to blue badge holders and inviting them to comment further was the right thing to do. And as I said, if we could have done it sooner, we would have done, and we will do it sooner for any future schemes. I'm delighted that school streets are so welcomed. I'm very proud of the work that my team have done to bring forward those 12 school streets in a very, very short space of time, working collaboratively with schools, and you know, in an environment where not everybody was welcoming of those as they were brought forward. There'll be things that we can learn from those schemes. Those schemes are experimental as well, and I'd be delighted to, you know, for us all to work together to roll out that program, you know, more ambitiously to other schools. It does involve the engagement of the school, so there's a process where the head of the school expresses an interest, and it's important that the work starts with the school, because we can't do, the local authority can't do it in isolation. We've got to work in partnership. But if we're all supportive of that, that's great. Likewise, you know, we have tried some other bike share schemes and things in the past. We're actively looking at what's possible in the future. The market is challenging, and you know, schemes across London have been withdrawn. There is a scooter trial going on in some places, and we'll watch that with interest. But again, you know, I agree we need to bring forward those alternative options to enable people to best use the infrastructure, the foundations that we're currently putting in place.
Well, can I just add, you said you didn't ignore businesses. There was a resident that went to, I think, over 50 businesses in Palmer's Green, around the Triangle and Alderman's Hill, and I think 99% of them had very strong views, and those views were ignored. So I don't think, I don't agree with what you said about, I think you should have contacted businesses or done some kind of virtual meeting with them, just to engage with. I think if you engage with them better, you would have heard their views. So if that's something you could do, I think that would be really useful. So I think just expecting them to go on the website, I don't think that's good enough.
So I think we can feed that back. But just to say, you know, we've had quite an extensive high streets and town centres programme over the past 2 years, where we've had well-attended public meetings. I personally have had roundtables with all the businesses. You know, it's fair to say the development of the high streets and town centres are at different stages. So, I mean, that's true. I accept that. But, you know, if you take Palmer's Green, for instance, actually, we have had a lot of engagement with businesses. The point, I think, which is a fair one, which is, was there a dedicated session for this thing? You know, actually, you know, perhaps there wasn't, but I don't think it's right to say that those businesses didn't have an opportunity. Now, going forward, perhaps we need to create a specific opportunity to be able to gather some more views. But I have to say, just because people are not happy with something doesn't mean that they haven't been engaged with, and we have to move away as councillors from this notion that, you know, somebody's angry so they haven't been engaged with. No, we hear sometimes that, we hear that frustration as well. It's just we happen to be at a point in the process where the trial is happening. But Richard, you know, let's have a think about, do we need to maybe post the survey to each of the businesses? You know, it's not a huge amount, a number, so perhaps we can do that proactively.
I'll certainly, yeah, I think, you know, we are, and we continue to listen to those businesses, you know, who participate in the consultations ongoing. Absolutely, we'll take away what more we can do that's targeted specifically at businesses. So we'll. And
we have all their addresses stuff because of business rates, so that should be fairly easy to do. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We're a bit over time, but I am going to allow Daniel to ask the last question, because I did say I would. Daniel,
thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Okay, my last point, and I'll try and keep it brief, because I think the point is it's about the ANPR and the cameras, which, you know, are making considerable amounts of money for the council. So in one way, it's, you know, Meadway in 5 months has made nearly £1 million. Warwick Road since September, 6 months, 422,000, and Fox Lane 371,000 over 5 months. So you're getting close to £2 million over that time. And so, you know, in one hand, you may be rubbing your hands, ka-ching, all this money could be used on all sorts of measures. But my point is a serious point, and that is, you know, quite understand if you say people break the rules and they should get fined for not doing it, and we can agree or disagree over the use of ANPR. But I think the real issue, which many residents have raised with me, and are genuine people who are not your flash Harrys or whatever's driving through, rushing, trying to cut across the borough. These are genuine people, many elderly people who've contacted me and others and said the signage wasn't clear. And this has been a continual issue, Richard. And really, all I would be saying is, as I say, I don't think the argument is about whether, as I say, well, let's put aside whether we agree with the use or not of ANPR, but it's an issue about surely it's right, if this issue is being raised, that the signage is unclear. And many people, genuine people, say it isn't clear when they're going by, just to put clearer signage up on the entry to these things, because if it's about making money, well, job done. If it's about discouraging people from actually going through, then surely just having clearer signage which says no through road or whatever, fines, if you do whatever, which is clear and not disputable, would be better for everyone. So I make that as a plea to you because it comes up time and time again. And I think it's something which, if that's the reason to stop people altogether, that would be fairer than just allowing the continual system where people are being hit for reasons because they just did not understand the signage. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, if I respond, I mean, I think if there's more we can do to communicate more broadly about what that signage means, and it's probably signage that may feature in other schemes, then we can look at doing that. The whole point, these schemes don't work if people or you don't get the benefits from them if people just ignore those cameras and drive through. The signage, in my view, is comprehensive. But any income that we do get, it has to be, we can't just spend it on anything. It has to be ring fenced for traffic and highway purposes, and typically in the past has been used to contribute towards the freedom passes. But we want these schemes to work. Those camera points have been put in through discussion with the emergency services because they're key routes that the emergency services want to continue to pass through. There are certain, when it comes to the signage, there's detailed traffic regulations that we need to adhere to. We can't just put any old signs up. Some people, for example, have suggested, why don't you put the no entry signs up, because they're clearer and they're more recognised. And I recognise that point of view. The reality is that if we do that, then we can't legally dispensate the emergency services from passing through them either, and their drivers simply wouldn't do that, and so therefore we defeat the purpose of their existence, which is to make sure that the areas remain permeable for the emergency services. So I do understand the frustration. I understand some, I can understand some cynicism, but we want, and we are seeing, those again in the early days, as I talked about, when a scheme goes in and there's a bit more perhaps confusion and lack of understanding, you're likely to see higher non-compliance rates. As the scheme beds itself in, you can see that those are reducing, and we want to get those down to zero essentially, so that the scheme is performing as we intended, but that money is ring fenced.
As Richard said, I've got examples like that in my own ward. I remember a couple of years ago, a yellow box junction was put in. It was put in for safety because people were regularly kind of blocking a major junction. And in the weeks that followed, there were a huge number of people that had were in the yellow box that received a fine. And then when I inquired about it, it was quite clear it was there was a peak to it, and then it dropped off. Now that dropping off business is the crucial bit, because it means that the traffic scheme is working. And just to reiterate, as councillors will know, local authorities are not permitted to implement traffic schemes to generate income. That's not, the law doesn't allow us to do that. It is a deterrent for people to stop them from breaking what is a rule of the traffic scheme. And then, as Richard said, that money isn't, we're not permitted to spend it on anything other than in that department, as I understand it.
Yeah, I get all of those points, and I appreciate your comments. Well, I was just say I'm not making a judgment whether or not ANPR is the right way or not to do it. I have my own views, and you clearly, the administration has theirs, and I accept that. What I just say is, sure, many people, and it's a lot of elderly people, have really not understood those measures, and I just think, can I ask you just to look as clearly as possible at what the best signage could be within the law, get that, which actually seeks to try and ensure that people don't make those innocent mistakes and get hit with fines, because that really, is, if it's genuine errors, You know, we want to avoid those as much as possible. But I do recognise, by the same token, that there's a potential conflict, because and I do get the things that money has to be spent in a certain way, but if there's a benefit for the council to use money, then obviously there is an incentive not to change that. But I just ask that you do look at the signage. But thank you.
Yeah, we absolutely will, and I will specifically ask Richard if he can go off and look at those areas, those cameras that where they're higher than the rest, and perhaps relook at those signs. Just to give members some assurance, though, the motivation for doing this is about trying to improve the lived environment. Quite frankly, if we were trying to, there would have been easier ways to generate income than implementing traffic schemes. As very experienced councillors on the committee will know, having led and implemented other schemes. So, it is not done for that reason. I think the collective officer time, could have been spent generating income via other means. That's not the motivation for this. This is about trying to improve the environment.
Thank you. And we really have to end the debate now. So Richard and Nestle, thank you very much for your time. And I know Sarah has been taking note in the background there. Right, so the rest of the panel will just have a little chat now. So officers and councillor, you are welcome to leave the meeting now. And thank you again for your time. It's been very, very interesting debate, and hope the public have also enjoyed it. So thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Thank
Good night, all.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Okay, panel, we're going to go on to agenda number 5, the week's programme. If you want to switch on your video so we can all see each other and unmute and whatever. No, thanks everyone. I thought that was really interesting tonight. I hope you were satisfied with some of the answers. So obviously we will need to go away and have a think. Please do send in more questions. Because I know there wasn't again sort of time to get everyone's views across. So we can actually ask more questions and we'll get them answered. And hopefully with our replies, we can start formulating our reports. Does anyone have any other views about tonight's meeting?
Chair, one word. Just you mentioned reports. How is it going to happen? What's the plan?
Right. Okay. At our next meeting on the 29th, so it's about the marine water sort of environment strategy. We should probably just concentrate an hour on that one. For the rest of the meeting, I think we will need to actually look at all the recommendations on that, and reports back that we've got, so that we can actually formulate, the last proper reports. We will just need to really think about, if we agree with any points made, whatever. But I want the next meeting, the last one, to actually concentrate on the last items that we should expect to put in the report. Then they will all be written up in time. So I really want us to just think about everything and ask questions now. So by April we can get all the answers that we want. So we can actually sort of just get something sort of decent written up. I mean, if you have any other sort of suggestion how to go about that, I'm not sure, but I want everyone to feel satisfied that we've answered all their points. We are getting the questions back now, answers back, which is useful. I'm still expecting questions back from the blue and green strategy. Again, but for that one, that is an ongoing process, so maybe that should be more of an interim report rather than an actual finished one. We got answers back from the waste services, so we can start formulating a report there. And so, you've seen the answers. If you want to question any of those, do come back to me and Andy about them, and then we can start writing things up. But things will be done, and they will be done on time. But it's important, to me that everyone is actually satisfied with everything. So it's anyone's got any recommendations, please do say.
I mean, from that experience from the last only other scrutiny committee I was in, it takes a lot of work if you want to come to some good recommendations with evidence and stuff, right? And that's why I had asked those questions from you, Chair, to get some answers on the strategy. And so when they give the responses after 7 months only at that meeting in April, right? It gives you very little. So I'm doing a lot of work on it already just to try and understand the issues right now, because the answers are not coming from the officers. Unfortunately, then we have to do it ourselves. And
Chair, but I've been assured by Officer Peter George that your questions will be incorporated into the report that they're going to give us on April the 29th.
But when you talk about scrutiny, Chair, you look at the answers and then you have to do some analysis on that. So it's not just them giving an answer for a question. There's no time to feed back that, right?
But unfortunately, we do have the time restrictions, which is why I think we should try and get the items that we've already talked about, try and finish them off as soon as we can before the meeting in April, where we just talk about moving water. I mean, everyone will do their best to actually start sort of constructing those reports as soon as possible, and we'll take any advice that's given to us, and I will start pushing for answers that we haven't got yet. But I want everyone to get the opportunity to actually make sure that all your queries are going to be answered. I mean, that is seriously that's really important for me to and I want you to understand that I will do all I can to make sure that our reports are they will be friendly, critical, and plus we need to also give recommendations. So I want people to really think about that as well. Let's not all be attack. Let's also suggest things, which I think previous reports haven't done so. Because I mean there was two sides to the story, and I know we cover loads of emotive issues here, and the rule of scrutiny is to scrutinize. So we have to do that. In slightly impartial way, I feel, which is why I don't really speak a lot, because I feel like I need to just step back a bit and see all points of view. But communication is really, really important here. So
Chair, can I just add? We were given lots of reports to read. So the one that says LTNs for all, and there was cycling reports. So we were sent lots, and I read them, and I thought we were going to have time to discuss them as well. So do you want us to send you questions on those reports, the Aldred report?
Yeah, anything to do, basically with the subjects, then because we just haven't got time, because the way scrutiny has been structured this year, we haven't had the opportunity to do like task force and stuff like that, where we could really concentrate on various sort of options. Because I know in the past, like Chavis report and Marine was last year. That was quite a very sort of a big report, wasn't it? And and it has been structured this way this year. So basically, we can't do those massive reports. So we have to do what we can with the information that we have. But please, like we mentioned, read those reports, and you've got any questions, we will ask officers, and we will get replies back to set up that the reports that we finish up with actually are beneficial. I don't really want to do stuff that's wishy-washy, and what's the point of them? It's we just want to make we want facts and figures, and and representations, and ultimately we have to make sure that our residents are happy with what we do.
Which is the main thing.
Absolutely, and I can't agree more. And I know I'm waffling here, but it's ultimately, we are the servants, and I just want everyone, like viewing tonight, or just I want to know that, you know, as councillors, we are on the ball here.
And I want you to know, I don't go on. I am representing residents, and it's not just Winchmore Hill, it's
Absolutely.
across the board, and I have to be their voice, and I just want you to know this is what I'm doing.
No, that's fine.
They have to be heard.
Yeah, no, because, you know, as individual councillors, we represent residents in our wards that, you know, that we voted for. But, you know, in the scrutiny panel, we represent the whole of Enfield, basically, you know. So it's it's a hard one, and it is going to be difficult. But I'm going to work closely with our governance team to make sure that, you know, we get the.
Yeah, I mean, Chair, that's why I was thinking, because there's a very specific constitutional and democratic role for scrutiny. It's to hold the executive and officers, decision makers to account. That's the role, right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
It also says in the documents that the officers have to give equal time to the executive and scrutiny, right? And that's why I'm very surprised, I know for various reasons, but to be offered no time at all for the Meridian environmental strategy is a bit concerning for me, because after 7 months of warning, you kindly send the question, ask for the questions, and we gave the questions, right? And for the officers to say they cannot respond for 7 months is not a good treatment of your scrutiny panel, is all I can say.
Okay. No, the point taken, and you know, your points will be, you know, noted. But I will say that I have, you know, talked with the officer, and I'm assured that the points you made, the questions you asked, are going to be taken seriously, and they will form part of the report.
Chair, what happened is, so I had to do a lot of further work now, because I was hoping they'll give the answers so we can do. So I'll send you the next round of questions, which I had to find myself, because I have got nothing else. So I'll share it with the whole panel, and maybe we can do some work on that. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. No, seriously. You know, our job is to ask questions. You know, so please do send them along, and I will do my best to get them answered. You know, it's no, things can be done as long as we have good communication, which I think I do with the departments. Then, you know, we will get the answers that you need. Right,
Chair, can I raise points, if I may?
Daniel, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I mean, yeah, I mean, Sheriff's point about you know, what actually are we expected to do at the end of this? I'm not sure, because tonight's meeting was interesting and instructive, and let's be clear, what we got very clear answers from both Richard and Councillor Caliscan, and you know what we got established. It was no attempt to sort of like befuddle us with data and stuff and whatever. It was stated it's a political decision. Now we can agree or disagree as a panel, or indeed have differences amongst our panel about our particular views. We can find evidence which supports or disagrees with the principles of LTNs, or make arguments and bring in a whole series of issues, which I'm sure we could, you know, I can certainly do that. I think Maria could probably do that, and maybe Cherith and others equally could do lots of that. But the issue is, I think we got a very clear answer tonight, and that was it's a political decision. That frames where things go. And so I'm not quite sure what we can do on this issue. You know, there are other issues, obviously, like the waste strategy and other things. But clearly, when you've got a direction from the council, it's very clear. I mean, that you know, that I think is the issue, and therefore I'm not quite sure what we can say. We can acknowledge what we've discussed tonight. We can acknowledge some of the strong feelings of residents, and we can acknowledge some of the concerns that are expressed about the workings or others, as some of the things we raised tonight. But I'm not quite sure ultimately where this goes, because the administration is very clear that they believe the principle of LTNs, and they're clearly obviously going to roll out more of them. Now, they might be adapted, but I'm not quite sure, you know, what we can actually add to that, other than the comments we've already raised or the comments that residents have raised.
Church, you know, just from my perspective, I will need clarity so I can feed back to the officers if panel members are saying that they are not interested in the evidence that is going to be gathered from the trials that are underway. And Richard, it was very, very clear that there is evidence being gathered that's presented to us as an organisation, both to officers and to politicians. We set a political direction, but it is the professional judgment, the knowledge, the understanding, many years of experience of officers who give impartial advice upon which politicians make decisions. So, you know, I appreciate comments being made, but it's, you know, from our perspective as an administration, we need to know if the scrutiny panel are actually interested in looking at the evidence, because we think it is important that you see that at the end of the trial period, because that is what we'll be looking at when we make a political decision, when we ultimately say, you know, what happens to these schemes.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure much more to add than other than fair enough, really. But yeah, I mean, if you can.
Well, but just to say, even if because I know that there is a limited period for scrutiny, you know, but all of that, everything that is gathered, which is evidence, which is all impartial advice, which is all the data that councillors have referred to, all of it will be published on the website. And whatever is presented to us as politicians will be exactly the same thing that is shared with residents and all other councillors. So I want to provide you with some assurance on that.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Chair, I'll just say it's helpful. It does enable us to bring in further evidence or concerns or issues which can be used as to formulate those, help you formulate those decisions. So thank you. That's clarity.
And thank you for that opinion. Yeah, I mean, this is quite an emotive issue, really, and we need to handle it really carefully and make sure that everyone is represented. All right. Okay, well, we're nearly at the end of the night, and we're going to finish on time. We've got 4 minutes left. So, really, it's the next date, just to clarify, is Thursday, the 29th of April, and it will be on the Mirror and Water, and we will formulate any sort of last minute sort of questions that we have about the reports then. Right, and other than that, can I thank Andy Ellis and Claire Bright in the background who've been looking after us for this evening. Again, thank you to everyone that's attended. So on that, we might, has anyone got any other questions or comments at all?
Thank you, Chair. Greatly chaired meeting.
No.
I'm happy. I'm happy to see Councillor Anderson happy as well.
Thank you.
No, I really found tonight really interesting, and I do mean that. You know, it's just good to just have a proper debate and no big hassles. You know, so we shall see anyway. Right. Well, with that, we've got 3 minutes to spare, so we've got time for a song and dance, though probably not really. We'll just say again, thank you to Andy and Claire being in the background for us tonight, and please do send me and Andy all your extra questions, and we will do our best to sort of get them all answered. And if anyone wants any extra meetings beforehand, either me or Andy, please do say. You know, I'm always around, so we can get clarity. We can work more closely together with these reports, especially you, Chair. If I know you would like to have a bit more talk, that's absolutely fine with me. Let's just communicate and get things right. So, right, that's the end of my waffling. We've got 2 minutes left, but why don't we have an early night? So,
okay, bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
okay, everyone.
Thanks, Chair. Night, night.
Thank you, Chair.
All right.